The COB is brought to you by Pepperstone, trusted by traders in over 160 countries. From Barangaroo Studios, here's what you need to know about the day in business and finance.
Well, hello, welcome to the COB. I'm Nadine Blaney. It's great to be here with you, flying solo in the studio today. A little lonely, but we'll make it through, and I've got a great guest coming up a little bit later on a day that we've got plenty of positivity in the market. I'm sure you know that we saw record highs for the S&P 500, for the NASDAQ as well. I think the S&P 500 record high was the 25th this year. Pretty incredible. But we do have, I suppose, some really key themes helping to drive markets. But before we get there, let's just quickly look in on how our market looks to be faring as the last of the day's trades come through. We've got the COB Australia Index up by about 0.7%, as is the S&P ASX 200. So if you're listening to this in podcast form, well, we'll get you updated as to where the market closed in just a few minutes' time. But a lot of the enthusiasm for this market, of course, on this Tech Rally Thursday, if we can call it that, was the fact that we do have these rate cuts in train in the G7 with the Bank of Canada, thanks Tiff Macklin, cutting rates there. I've got to say, as a, well, actually, Canadian, still, dual citizen, lucky me, I will say that Canadians in general don't obsess as much, just generally speaking, as to the level of interest rates, because they're less dependent on variable mortgages than here in Australia, but still, obviously sent reverberations right around the world. Adding to that, of course, we had that data in the United States. Nobody likes the ADP jobs report unless it, I guess, confirms what they'd like to see coming through in the data. I'm saying that a bit facetiously, but there you go, the BOC leading the way. And immigration impact, well, that is in relation to one of the corporate stories out today. IDP Education, IEL is the ticker code, don't get confused. That's obviously related to international students and the caps there. I'll detail that for you in just a moment. Worthwhile, though, checking in on the sectors of the day to see what performed, what outperformed, what underperformed, and look no further than tech for the outperformance today, with WiseTech Global up by 3%. Xero also having a good day. Don't forget, this week we had news of that convertible note coming through. I was chatting with James Garish from Shawn Partners yesterday, really before we learned a lot about it. But yeah, it looks as if maybe Xero will be looking to go on the acquisition trail, potentially in the UK and the US. NextDC was featured in today's episode of The Call. The Call today was a blue chip special, and I really think it's interesting that my guests nominated NextDC as an Aussie blue chip, really showing where a lot of the attention is going to in the future. That's data centers. Altium also up, as well as Technology One, although to a lesser degree. Life 360, we learned this week about its listing in the United States, although we had a pretty good idea that was happening beforehand. The banks, continue to go from strength to strength. Commonwealth Bank, the only bank that reports in the upcoming reporting season. Really interesting to get a view on the economy and what's happening in the mortgage market as well, not just with competition in the space, but also with arrears. So look, positive session there. There's not much you can be too upset about. Also in the healthcare space, CSL up by 1.5%, but pretty good gains all around there. Sonic Healthcare up by 1.9%. Sonic was on the list. We spoke with Gary Glover, who's a technical analyst, and he detailed what he sees in the charts for Sonic. So don't forget, when we mention these interviews, we've done a whole host of them throughout the day. You can always go to our website, ausbiz.com.au, if you're not going there every day. And we put, what interviews are trending there. We put the big CEO interviews there, small cap CEOs as well, I've got to say. But with the likes of our regular guests, Gary Glover from Novus Capital, he does technical analysis, and I think it was 5 charts that he detailed for us today. So go look it up online and catch up through the night. There wasn't tons of big corporate news. I feel like that's a refrain we've been going on about for a little bit, but SkyCity today lowering its guidance. So now expecting it to be between 100 and 125 Kiwi dollars. That really did damage to its share price, off by close to 15%. Follow the funds is what I'm always told when it comes to these fund managers. So posting net fund outflows of 0.1 billion, but that's narrowing. So I guess looked a bit positive there for Magellan. Institutional inflows coming through as well. Mineral Resources, well, it has sold a stake in its private road haul network to Morgan Stanley Infrastructure Projects. That was a cool $1 billion coming through. Telix giving a bit more meat on the bones when it comes to its US listing on the NASDAQ. It's hoping to raise $200 million US dollars in the IPO. It will remain listed here in Australia, though, with its NASDAQ ticker to be TLX as well. But the big one today was IDP Education. It warned of a pretty big hit to business because of the changing rules. You know, we've already got that framework from the federal government when it comes to curbing migration, particularly when it comes to international students. So it has had to, put the details around that, and it came out with a profit downgrade. Share price reacted really negatively, off by 7.5%. Let's get to Jimmy Jang. He is joining us from Macro Capital to get his take on today's session. Jimmy, let's start big picture. I mean, lots of positivity, but we still do have very big risk events coming later this week.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I mean, look, we obviously seen the Canada becoming the first majority economy to cut rates by 25 basis points, about 4.75%, first time since the March 2020. Tomorrow we got the European Central Bank meeting, which also is expected to reduce the interest rate by another 25 basis points from that 4%, which will be, if it happens, will be the first time since 2019. We also had the euro area inflation for May that came in slightly higher than the expected, with the headline inflation at 2.6% and the print for core at 2.9%. So a lot of changes that we're doing internally at Macro to kind of offset this type of volatility that we might potentially see throughout the week and through this month as well.
Okay, and so when we think about positioning, like, are you advising clients that they need to be chasing this rally that seems to go on and on and on?
Yeah, as you have mentioned, Nadine, I mean, the S&P 500 notched that new record closing high thanks to the rally in the artificial intelligence chip darling, the NVIDIA, up more than 5% to top a $3 trillion market valuation that surpassed Apple as the number 2 most valuable company in the market now. So one of the main things we would like to make sure is that we don't over allocate into this a bit of a big wave that we're seeing. We actually rather focus on the sectors or the spaces that's either underperforming or undervalued at this stage. And I guess one of the main sector or the space that we looked at today, for example, was in the natural gas space.
Oh, really? So is that in the big cap, small cap, mid cap? How do you play that?
I'm going to be a little bit boring here, Nadine. I'm recommending Santos to the market today. Really good outlook in terms of where the Santos is looking at. They're very committed to executing its strategy to meet global energy demands while advancing its climate transition action plan for that decarbonization. And also Santos is focused on expanding their LNG portfolio, notably with that Barossa project, expected to produce first gas in the first Q3 in 2025. Progress is being made towards that final investment decision for the Papua LNG project. First oil from that Pika project is also anticipated in the first half of 2026. So really strong outlook on what Santos is proposing so far. So we make some small allocation to Santos, probably close to about 5% today. And then we look to accumulate that with what obviously what the natural gas space is going to propose for us over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, right. And so you're looking for undervalued companies, and in your view, are they getting harder to find, or is there still plenty of opportunity out there?
There's plenty of opportunity. I mean, we've seen the IDP Education getting hit with that news coming out. But from our perspective, we got all these different companies that not just underperforming due to the company performance. Like, for example, we've seen Woodside that had a really fantastic result that came out since February, but the share price or the market is just not answering to the great result that Woodside has proposed or presented. So from our perspective, we got a lot of great names that's on our watch list. Like, for example, we got Coles, Woolworths, that's also in our consumer staples watch list at the moment, especially with Woolies getting quite hammered over the last couple of months. So those are definitely on our watch list to pick up as the market slowly react.
Okay. And so, Jimmy, when you are speaking with clients, do you talk to them at all about being a little bit defensive in some areas? Like, is diversification still really important?
It's a good point, Nadine. The way we actually hedge, or I guess get defensive towards the equity market, is actually by way of private credit. So at Macro, we actually are slowly diversifying our clients' asset classes rather than just a sector in the listed market. So private credit has always been the most attractive investment since the rate hike we've seen over in the US and as well as in Australia. So by diversifying our clients' asset classes from, let's say, equities to private credit, there's a bit of a certainty that clients are achieving through that high interest rate era that we're living in at the moment. So through like a senior debt, like first and a second mortgage, that our clients are accumulating. So definitely it will be something that we're allocating to those type of asset classes in this current market.
All right, Jimmy, it's been a pleasure to have you wrap the day with us and give us some insight into your thinking there at Macro Capital. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy.
Jimmy Jang there joining us from Macro. All right, he did mention IDP Education. It is the worst performing stock of the day in percentage terms on the S&P ASX 200. Nick Morton from Resident Asset Management and Mark Gardner from MPC Markets give us their take.
The company, the product, everything else, but the bigger picture is pretty toxic for IDP at the moment, and still potentially has further to run. There'll be a time to buy the stock, and that's when the political winds move in a different direction. But we still see a runway for a sell-off from here.
Okay, it's a broader market sell-off. This is the sort of stock that could get quite ugly because people might be still holding on because of that nice long run over many years. But yeah, I think it's if you've held it for 5 odd years, I think you need to bank your profits. I don't think it's going back to those highs, and certainly not in the near term. And I think today's news is just testament to that. I think it'll just get worse.
So that is the verdict on that IDP Education. IEL is the ticker code. So the ASX, really broad-based gains today. Every sector finishing in positive territory. And I was just reading Kyle Rada from Capital.com's note. I'm not a technical analyst, but he says the index has broken through technical resistance, so making another push to the top of its range. So that's bullish going forward. When we look at some of the best and worst performers, look no further than Coronado Global Resources did have an investor meeting today, talking about continuing to review potential acquisition opportunities. So this is at the AGM, saying that M&A options considered last year required substantial premiums versus organic growth, and that it's targeting increased production rates in 2025. So that sent its share price higher. Red 5 is on the list as well. We're watching gold prices push higher. Silver Lake Resources, also one of the best performing companies, and Genesis Metals, or Minerals, I should say, as well. And in the mix there, Nanosonics up by 6%. I don't know why I keep saying down when it comes to Nanosonics. Okay, laggards, IDP Education, there you go. We've got Megaport on that list as well. We saw Seek looking to offload one of its businesses yesterday, and it had a good day yesterday, so it looks like just a bit of give back. We've got Downer EDI on the list, as well as Sigma Health, and no big reason that I can see for Sigma Health as it stands today. In the small cap part of the market, Race Oncology had some good test results come through, and the share price is up by about 11%. On the flip side, though, if we're looking for laggards in the small end, Core Lithium down by 15%, and Hancock and Gore as well, off by close to 9%. Tonight, it is all about the ECB. So we've had it talked about all day today. We are expecting to see a cut. If they didn't cut, there would be big credibility issues for the ECB, and some will say that, it's got a very constructive view on underlying inflation, so why not cut, especially when you've got the Bank of Canada going first. We also get retail sales in the Eurozone, so that will likely reflect weak demand, as their policy is tight there, and that's why they do have to cut, or will likely cut. In the US, we get the trade balance, expecting it to be supported by Asian demand, and we get the initial jobless claims as well, expected to remain pretty low for now. We also get the trade balance coming from Canada. Here tomorrow, we get RBA Deputy Governor Hauser speaking. I'm not quite sure what the title of that speech is, but if I know the RBA, it'll probably be something pretty to the point. They've got the same sort of, I think, what can we say? Nomenclature as we do. Just call it what it is. Say what it is on the tin. I can't get it up right now, but yeah, you have to trust me on that one. And we get the Chinese trade balance as well. So let's see if I can get the chart to work for this last check-in on the local market. There's the COB Australia Index. It finished higher to the tune of 0.8%. Bit of selling though in the S&P ASX 200, closing at 7,821, up by 0.7%. Week to date, it's up by 1.6%. So we'll see what happens in New York tonight. That will go a long way to dictate what happens on our Friday session. But yeah, anything goes, doesn't it? And just looking to see if there's any breaking news out of London or the EU as we close this program, and nothing yet. So it was an absolute pleasure for us to spend the day with you today. We hope you caught the interviews that you did want to see, and if you didn't, don't forget you can catch up online, ausbiz.com.au. If you don't subscribe to our newsletter as well, you might want to do that. We send you a daily wrap of the market, a guest view or our view on something that's happening out there, along with some of the key interviews from throughout the day. All right, that does it for today. We'll see you tomorrow morning. We're live from 9:45.
The COB is brought to you by Pepperstone, trusted by traders in over 160 countries.
Gil.
Oh, hey, Ken.
Here we go.
You're still trading?
Pepperstone. Trusted in over 160 countries. You?
Well, I'm still with...
I don't think anyone trusts them.
No, I'm fine with it. Just like I'm fine with my trusty coach. 1980s John McEnroe.
Pathetic! Horrible! 1980s, huh? So, really temperamental?
Keeps me on my toes.
Awful! It's a bit intense.
Be better.
Still fine with it.
Use your racket.
He's just staring at us.
Yeah, sometimes he yells and then sometimes he just stares.
Is he aiming for your face, Gil?
He's fine with it.
Yeah, he's definitely trying to hit you.
Fine with it.
Don't be fine with it. Switch to Pepperstone, trusted by traders in over 160 countries.
Come on, you cannot be serious.
Don't do that.
Ow.